just going back to the racing, because this has always intrigued me. Not the type of photography or videography I've ever got involved with at all. But I can only begin to imagine how dangerous it could be. Perhaps it isn't. How do you keep yourself safe? I mean, you know, are you far away? Are you actually getting right into the mix?
I cannot tell you the amount of times I have been hit by stones, and I've got a story about that as well. I also hit by burning rubber. I have been burnt. I have had clothes ruined because of burning rubber. Fuel, I've been covered in race fuel, and if anyone knows race fuel, it's horrific. It removes all the moisture from the air, and you get this like wretched car. It's horrible. Yeah. I am definitely not always safe. It is. I have done some stupid things like to get the photo, and it's all for that end result, isn't it? You just in the moment. Especially in the last 4 years, I've had, because of the nature of the events and who I've worked with, I've had health and safety advisors saying, like, Dan, we know you've done something like this before, but we really don't think you should do this. And I'm like, it'll be fine, it'll be okay. They're like, well, we're just letting you know that we're not signing this off. So you're doing this on your own. I'm like, it's fine, I'll be good. So yeah, it's other people are starting to take notice that I've done some silly stuff.
But your shots are great, so
thank you. Well, that's what everyone always says. They're like, it was worth it, Dan worth it. I mean, that most recent crazy one was probably sitting in a dodgem whilst Ken Block did donuts around me in Ford Escort Cosworth. That was probably one of the most ridiculous ones, because this dodgem wasn't just a dodgem on the floor, right? Because that would be safe. Because this was a dodgem on a wire wheel, like, you know, one of those ones for copper wire. Like the big old, yeah. So it was on a plinth, and the dodgems just bolted on top with one bolt, and I couldn't rock it because if I rocked it, I'd fall over. And he came around me and did donuts, and I think he did like three or four donuts. Now I couldn't see at this point, which is usual, but I like to try and get some cool angles whilst I'm doing it. So I'm moving around in this dodgem, and then I realized I was pushing my luck because I could feel the whole thing wobbling. Now I couldn't see where he was. So that was that was probably one of the stupidest things I've done recently. But the results were sweet.
That sounds terrifying. You're much braver.
It's funny. It's not as bad as because I've done a lot of donut shots. They're kind of a classic with motorsport. You get the trick with my motorsport stuff is capturing something that not everyone can see. So that's always been it'll be the same, Kirsten, I guess, with your concert photography and stuff. You're getting something that not everyone sees.
Yeah, it's almost like a heightened reality of what's happening, and you're capturing a feeling and an emotion as well as an action, and that's the tricky part, I think. That is
could not sum that. Is the emotion with the action. And I one of my favorite ones is to put yourself in a situation where no one should ever be. And for example, let's just say the 16 to 35 mm lens. So the Canon 16-35 is one of my favorites. You get that constant aperture of f2.8, and you can rely on it. So what I like to do is switch it to 16 mm and then have a car donut around me. And the shots are just, you don't have that perspective. Like, people do not see a car at 60mm right in their face with smoke pouring out the back and flames popping out of the exhaust. So it doesn't, like, it's special.
Well, that's exactly that. You know, when you do concerts and you're on stage with the act, nobody ever is there, and that's why you get these angles that you don't see. You don't see them. Well, you may see them on television, but you certainly don't see them when you're at the concert in the audience. You know, that's what makes it so interesting, I think. Yeah.
You're giving someone something special. You're not just taking a photo and moving on to the next one. It's about sharing something a bit special. And a lot of these people that we photograph, and I mean the concerts as well, they're people's heroes. So if you can show them their hero from another perspective, like that's a massive win, like for yourself, for that person, and the crowd, like the audience that you're making it for. Not to mention the company that hired you to do it. Like that's just awesome. There's kind of you end up with a shot list, and I'm sure you're the same. I have like a very regular shot list that I'll regularly update as well, and that will have my key things, and I'll try and touch on as many sort of over the top moments like that, like what I was describing with the donuts, as possible in sort of one shoot or one event. So yeah, so actually I've got another story of how dangerous it is. This one a little bit less exciting than achieving a fantastic result of a car sort of donut around me or anything like that. This one was, I was in France and I was on the Swiss border, one of the race tracks over there, and it's terrible, I've actually forgotten what it was called, but you'll understand why I probably forgot it in a moment. So anyway, it was a drift event. It was one of the Pro Drift Series, European Pro Drift Series events, and I'd been following the entire championship, and we're talking like prime busyness for me as well. So this was like in the start of June, and that I was going straight from there the next day to the Isle of Man TT, and then I was staying there for 2 weeks, and then I'd be going straight to another drift event. So it was like, it was non-stop. Like, yeah, I like using laundry services in hotels, which I never thought I would ever have to do, but that's that's literally how bad it was that summer. I remember quite explicitly. But anyway, in France, and I am capturing this, and I'm trackside at the time, and I was watching the movement of the cars, and I could see a really cool angle. So I'll try and explain it. They were coming down straight. So it was a Marshall point, and it was alongside a right-hand sweeping bend, and they were probably coming at this bend about 110, 120 20-mile-an-hour entry speed, okay, into what's called a clipping zone. And if you just imagine in drifting, a clipping zone is like a flag, and they have to get the rear end of the car or the front, depending on front or rear, as close to this sort of flag as possible, and that scores them the points, okay? Now, what was happening is the cars were coming off the edge of this and hitting what we call the kitty litter, which is the stones, okay? So they were hitting the stones, and the stones were spraying up towards in the direction of the crowd, but we're talking like a huge runoff, so it was never going to hit the crowd. But the shot looked amazing, because if you caught the car coming, you got the flag for the points, the kitty litter, you got the speed of the car, the stones start flying up, and in the background is all the crowd cheering, right? So wicked. Like, it was exactly what I wanted for the lead image that I was going to deliver and say, look at this. Like, we've got, because one of the key things was always promoting crowd interaction, always promoting the public without showing any faces. So that's the other thing. You got to, that's with a lot of commercial stuff, that's what you got to do. But anyway, I'm sat there, I'm watching the cars. I always like to assess the situation first. So I don't just dive in behind the lens, and because that's how accidents happen, funnily enough. Yeah, but that's how accidents normally happen. You just dive in and go, yeah, and then boom, that's it. This one, I watched these cars. So I watched 4 cars, and I thought, this car's contrasted enough for me to, I think, get a good shot. So I'll get one with this, and then I'll wait for one of the Monster Energy drivers to come, and I'll do the same thing. So I've got like options. Anyway, this car launches in. I remember it being a BMW, and he's coming in fast. He's coming in hot, and so I frame him, and it's what we call a reverse pan. So I start on what I call, I don't know if it's technical term, but I call them reverse pans, because you start off following the car, but you don't start shooting until the car's exiting. So it's like you're not actually. It's weird. It's not like a normal pan like that. It's like nothing, and then click, 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 click. I'm following it around. So it's like weird psychological thing in my mind. I call it reverse pan. So anyway, car drops a wheel off, and I think I'm committed. So I'm gonna stay shooting this. I'm gonna track this car. He then drops a second wheel off into the kitty litter. Stones start flying, and my brain's telling me this is too soon. He's come off the track too soon. I thought, right, doesn't matter, I'm committed. I start clicking, start getting the photos, and then next thing you know, I get hit by something, and it hits, I feel a sequence of things spray across my face and the camera, and next thing you know, I'm on the floor. So I heard broken glass, and I was like trying to get my senses together. And Marshall, I do speak French, so I was lucky enough to kind of understand, but I could hear people talking about, I couldn't see anything at this point, and I was on the floor, and I could hear people talking about, he's been hit, the English guy's been hit, we need to get him off, like we need to clear him out. And I was like, all I remember saying was, I'm not English, I speak French. So I was so confused. And they were just like, we need to help him up. So they picked me up, and I'm immediately sick everywhere. like the worst, like awful. Like it's so terrible. And they're all looking at me, and like I've got, you know, like when people are like, is he okay? And I was like, why are they looking at me? And I was like, I can barely see people. Why is there 7 of that person? Anyway, what had happened is the stones had completely gone straight through my lens. So my 300mm was ruined, which is fine. These things happen. The 1DX had about 3 or 4 new scars. That thing was still strong, by the way, so credit to that. So that had a few scars across the top. And then the rest of the stones had pelted me here, and the Marshall point that I was sat next to completely destroyed, like just through the walls, the windows, everything. So I'd been hit twice, I think 3 times across the head. And I remember being so, well, I don't remember really much. There's a hilarious sequence of photos though that show it because I held my finger down on the button. But that was terrifying. From what I can gather, I said I was okay, grabbed my gear, walked back to the paddock, and this is where a friend of mine, Ricky, who I work with a lot, he was the videographer on these projects. Ricky saw me come back and he was like, "You okay, Dan?" And apparently I didn't say anything, and I just dropped my cameras in the paddock. So I dropped my cameras in the paddock, and I went and sat in this shaded area, and I didn't talk to anyone. He came over immediately with a first aid, and he was like, "You would never do that, something's wrong." And I had severe concussion basically from this impact and the welt. Oh my gosh, like absolutely amazing. So of course, what would you do in that situation? I couldn't carry on working, but I knew I had to be at the Isle of Man TT the next day. And I stupidly flew, and I have never been so sick in my life. So yeah, that was, again, a huge mistake, because people who are self-employed will understand, if anyone really, I mean, if you've got commitments, you've got to try and keep to them. And I didn't care about my own personal safety at this point, and I flew with a basically concussion. And I remember landing in France, and landing on the Isle of Man, and the person I was meeting had already heard through the grapevine that I'd been hurt. And he said, "Can you see me okay?" And I was like, "Not really." And he said, "Right, you're not leaving the house for 48 hours. We need to keep an eye on you." And they kept me sort of locked away in a dark room for 48 hours. But that is the worst accident I've had, luckily, to be honest, because I know people that have had far worse. And I've seen far worse accidents in doing my job. But this was me anyway. That was my story.
Wow. Kids, don't try this at home.